apologies for starting a little bit later than scheduled. We're just catching up and giving people who were at the presidential address time to catch some lunch. Welcome, really. Thanks so much for being here, so numerous. So this session, so I should start with some introduction. So my name is Paola Manzini. I'm the co-program chair together with Martin Weidner of the ESEM conference. And we wanted to have one lunch session, which is some kind of mentoring session, which is, however, aimed not at what happens as soon as you finish your PhD or advice on the job market, but we wanted to look at the next step. So, once you have a job and you really want to move to, you're now kind of on your own and you want to move to the next stage of your career, hopefully quickly. So I'm delighted to have here 3 wonderful examples of very normal people who, however, are exceptionally talented and have made it, and are making their way rapidly through the ranks. So I'm going to introduce them, and then the way we're going to play this is each of them in turn is going to take one particular aspect. So the things that we thought might be interesting for you is, number one, now you are in your new job. You no longer have that person, your supervisor that you could go for, and it was their job to listen to you. So how do you get feedback? The other question that we want to address is how do you manage the many competing pressures that will happen in your life? And typically there's also a number of life events that happen as you go through your working career. And next is how to get to the next step, how you get to your promotion, okay? Once you are an assistant professor or equivalent, how do you get to the level of associate? So here with me, we have Paul Hufe, who's at the University of Bristol, Federica Romei, who is at the University of Oxford, and Laura Liu, who is at the University of Pittsburgh. So please, Paul, take it away.
Can you hear me all right? Perfect. Just waiting for the slides to come up. There they are. So I was asked to give my thoughts on how to get feedback once your supervisor is not there anymore. So I started kind of like this process on reflecting what actually changed for me once my supervisor was not there anymore, at least on a regular basis. And the first conclusion that I think that came out of this thought process in terms of what really changes in terms of getting feedback is actually there's not so much that is changing if you're doing it right already. So what do I mean by that? Of course, the supervisor is always an important resource in order to get feedback on the work that you're doing, maybe the most important one. However, I think already at the stages of the PhD, it shouldn't be kind of like the only source of where you get your feedback from. You should always, of course, talk to your fellow PhD students. You should always talk to incoming seminar speakers. You should always come to beautiful places like Barcelona in order to interact with your fellow peers and so forth. And I think like if you're already starting kind of like to build this network of people that you can draw on in order to get your feedback and have this multiplicity of different sources, then in the transition actually from the PhD into a postdoc or the assistant professor position, I think there's not really that much that is changing if you're doing these things already. However, it is, of course, also indisputable that kind of like one source of feedback is going away, namely your supervisor. Of course, most of us don't sever their relationships with their supervisor completely. I mean, they're still there, and probably they're also still very eager to help you if push comes to shove, but probably you don't have like those regular meetings anymore. So the question is then, of course, how can you get kind of like additional, how do you get to additional sources of feedback? And I think like one key element to build those additional resources really to be proactive and also to have no shame in asking. And I think that is very important because, I mean, I'm also sometimes very timid or kind of like think that I'm wasting the time of people when I want to talk about research, but I think one shouldn't have that feeling. I think that one really has to step over one's own shadow. And that can, of course, take multiple forms, right? And how, in terms of how you can be proactive in the interaction with people. One thing that is, of course, there is kind of like that you can always kind of like, and I think many of us are doing that already, kind of like if you have a draft of a paper, just share it with people who are active in your discipline, who are closely related in your to your area of work. And I think like the inner disposition of many scientists is just that they're very willing to engage with research, right? It's something that they're intrinsically interested in, such that they're also willing to take the time to actually give you feedback on the work that you're doing if you're kind of like working on something that is closely related to their heart. So I think there's no shame in basically sending your papers around and asking for feedback. Very closely related to that, and I think that is especially important in the times of kind of like digitization, you can also always just ask whether you can have a quick Zoom call, right? And I think that is something even for me, for example, if someone shares a paper with me, it's actually my default mode of interacting with people. I always say, like, let's have a Zoom call, talk about the paper for 20 minutes, because then you have kind of like on the spot an interaction with this person. It is more interactive, you get to know this person, and you also kind of like save your time of reading through the entire 50, 60 pages of the paper. So I think that's also a valuable mode of how you can reach out to people. Then I think, like, especially in the early career stages, of course, it is also, one big question is also how you get on the seminar trail, right? Of course, you want to have kind of like invitations to seminars where you have kind of like close interactions with many people during one day in a very condensed manner. And I think for some of us, it's very easy to get on a seminar trail because you have a pedigree in terms of the institution that you're coming from, or you have already published great papers, you have a name in the literature, maybe your supervisor is actively promoting you to certain people and so forth. But for many of us, this is not the case. And again, I would say there's really no shame in asking and reaching out to people who work at institutions where you think it would be useful to present your work. So if I get those requests, I don't know, then I'm just sharing it with the colleagues who are actually organizing the seminar series. And I mean, you will never kind of like get a very negative feedback on that, right? So there's no kind of like, it doesn't hurt to ask. One thing that should also, I think that one should also consider, even if you won't make it on the seminar presentation list for the department seminar, oftentimes many institutions have also more informal ways of how people present their work internally, and oftentimes they're open spots. So if there's no spot in the, I don't know, the official seminar series anymore, however, if people think it would be useful to see their work also for more people at the department, oftentimes there's a disposition to put you in one of those more informal slots, which also gives you kind of like a nice way of presenting your work at the institution that you want to present it at. Okay. Two last points on asking people. I think, of course, as I said in the beginning, it can be kind of like daunting to reach out to people. But however, there are also kind of like little steps that you can take in terms that kind of like reduce a little bit the hurdles in terms of reaching out to people. So you don't immediately have to email kind of like the big shot in the area that you're working in, right? Usually you already have like a small network of people that you know, that you feel comfortable interacting with. So if it comes to asking whether you can present at a certain institutions, just make use of those networks and have kind of like this low entry barrier way of getting yourself onto the schedule. Another thing I think that is important is proactivity is super nice and important. However, one shouldn't fall into the trap of being generic. So what happened to me a couple of times, especially like after big events like those, that I receive emails from people who kind of like ask for feedback on their work, but I have the impression by the way the email was formulated that basically everyone who works on inequality or has like inequality in the title of their presentation basically receives the same email. And that is, of course, maybe not the best mode of actually stimulating people to engage with your research. So try to be proactive, but also targeted in terms of like how you approach people. The next thing I want to say is that after the PhD, coming into the postdoc, the assistant professorship, and so forth, I think you're now part of an in-group, and that is something that you should use. And when I say in-group, I don't mean that by no means as a value judgment, that all of a sudden you're a better researcher, or that you're even a better person, or anything of that. What I mean by that is basically that, at least in my experience, the way people perceive you changes, and at the same time, you also have access to much more informal networks. And I think that is something you should definitely use. So when I say kind of like the way people perceive you changes. What I mean by that is, for example, if you're reaching out to somebody, asking to get feedback on your paper, as I said, usually there's an intrinsic motivation to engage with that research. But once you're kind of like an assistant professor or a postdoc, there's also an instrumental reason that kicks in, because people who receive this email, they know, okay, this is a person who's trying to make a career in academia, working in a field that is very related to mine. So it could be a future co-author, it could be a potential referee, and so forth. So there's an increased, or kind of like an additional reason why people could actually be willing to engage with your research. In terms of informal networks, what I mean by that is that, especially internally, so for me as a PhD student, it was oftentimes like a big deal to reach out to other people in faculty who are not my supervisors, right? You have a formal appointment where you kind of like sit down with those people, you don't know them. It's kind of like, it creates a little bit of anxiety. Now, once you're kind of like made it to the other side, however, I mean, you just go to lunch with those people, you have coffee, you meet them at faculty meetings and so forth, and that creates a lot of room for informal interactions, where it's very easy to kind of like also float your research into the interaction that you have with those people and kind of like build a working relationship in terms of getting informal feedback from them. The last bit of advice, or the last bit I think that is very important, is that, I mean, the core kind of like to receiving feedback is also just to be a decent human being. And that is kind of like, just show reciprocity, right? I mean, you can always ask for feedback, but I think you should also be ready to return the favor to people, because you want to kind of like you can only ask to be to be treated in a certain way if you're actually willing to treat people in the same way. So just kind of like be generous in terms of giving feedback, and that kind of like also reduces the entry barriers for you then also to ask those people for feedback on your work whenever you need it. And that's basically me for the moment. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah. Hey, good. So what better introduction than, so I'm supposed to speak about managing your time between competing pressure. And I think maybe I'm not the right person to speak about that, because in the front line there is my daughter that is babysitted by my graduate student, just to give you the idea of the managing pressure. I mean, not babysit completely, but he's helping with her. So once that you start to become an assistant professor, there are many challenges and many new things that you will face due to the fact that before you were a PhD student and you were shielded in some sense by the faculty, assistant professor, and so on and so forth. Now that you're an assistant professor, postdoc, or maybe you work in a policy institution, you become an adult and you are part of this adult world, and people expect that you're doing a little bit more. So I foresee mainly three main challenges. There are many more, but we have some time, so we're going to spend a lot of time here. And the first challenge is how to balance work and free time, right? You want to do free time. You want to go on vacation, you do sport, maybe you like music, maybe you like cinema, museum, so on and so forth. I don't know. You have some passion. And on the other side, there is this work. And this is like a strange work, because it's not a work that you go there in the office and you have to sit there for 8 hours. You can sit there for 24 hours and nobody will say anything to you. So it's very difficult to balance these two things, right? Because you think that the more you work, the more you're going to produce. Now, the second difficulty is like when you decide how much time you allocate to work, then there are many tasks now that you have to do. Before you were a PhD student, mainly research and sometimes teaching assistant. Now there are a lot of tasks and you have to decide how to allocate your effort/time. And then the third point is a little bit opposite of what Paul said to us to now, is like how to answer to many polite and friendly requests. And I'm going to be less generous than he was. But I mean, I think with research is right. There are many requests that are not research, or many, maybe, I mean, we will see. Okay, let's go with the first challenge, how to balance work and free time. I'm not, just to say, I'm not a pro. It's not that I do this with my job. So I didn't know how to do it. And from 2015 to 2019, my approach to work, it was this. I went to the office and could work 7 hours, 8 hours, I don't know, I work up to the point that I was exhausted. And then I work the weekend, and then I work whenever I should, because I feel that, oh, I should produce, and the more I sit there, the more I'm going to produce. And I don't know if you're going to do something like that, but I think it's very common at the early stage of your career that you sit in your office and you think you need to show to the others and to yourself that now you're grown up and you're going to work like crazy. Now, in 2019, I have a huge endogenous shock, like my first daughter arrived, and I want to spend time with her. I mean, it's not that I didn't want to spend time with my husband, but let's say that my husband was an assistant professor. We had the same problem, right, that we want to work. Now, in 2019, there were like 2 constraints. The first one is that you have a nursery, and the nursery is not open 24 hours, and we couldn't afford the babysitter for the time. So in some sense, we know that at a certain point in time, we should go back to our house with our daughter. But the second and most important constraint is that we want to spend time with our daughter. For us, it was very important to be there in the afternoon and spend these 2 hours with her. We got excited. We were happy to be with her. And also, especially in the weekend, we want to be with her. We want to spend vacation with her. We want to have free time. So from that moment, I decided to change a bit my structure of working. And it's not that now it's optimal. I mean, you can still see my daughter with my graduate student there. And what I do now is that before I go to the office in the morning, I decide how much I want to work. And I decide both in terms of time, in the sense that I have this constraint that at 5, I mean, the nursery closes at 6, but at around 4:35, I want to be at the nursery. And then the second is that I do a feasible to-do list. I say, okay, today I want to do A, B, C, and D. This is like my task for today, right? This is what I want to do for today. And it should be feasible. I mean, you cannot say in one day I want to submit 5 papers, so I want to do session 1, session 2, session 3, session 1 million, because they're not going to do. You can do session 1, right? And then what I do is when either time or the to-do list is over, I stop to work. And I go back home, and to be honest, I found myself that I'm much more productive doing, some planning before I go to work than what I did before that I sit forever. Because then at a certain point, my brain, at least this is my experience, it's not that should be your experience, my brain was like doing social media, I was doing a lunch maybe 2 hours with colleague, I don't know, I was like a lot of distraction going on, because at the end you cannot sit 12 hours in front of the computer without being distracted, right? So in this case, when I go to the office, I still have lunch with my colleague, I enjoy my time, but I have like 30 minutes lunch, and I tend to get things done, right? And again, this is my experience. Now, imagine that you decide that the time that you want to allocate to the work. Now, the problem is that before, your work was only research. Now you have different tasks. Now, if you're in academia, I spend all my time in academia, so I know more academia. What you should do is like research. 1, 2, 3 is not the order, just research, teaching. If you're in a policy institution, you swap teaching with policy. Administration. So administration is like replying to the email, replying to the student, doing a lot of tasks that are like quite boring, but some of them they're exciting, but some of them they're very boring. And citizenship is like being a good citizen, right? Going around, reply to feedback. And you need to decide how much time to allocate or effort to allocate to every possible task. Now, in your mind, you're going to think, I'm perfect, I'm going to allocate 100% to research, 100%. So I'm going to do research perfect, teaching perfect, administration, I'm going to reply to all the main, citizenship. I think this is unfeasible. So just to say, when you're going to start this work, you're going to do all the tasks at 100%. By 100%, I think at your best, right? You're going to be the best teacher, best researcher, best administrator, best citizen. At a certain point, you need to decide that there are going to be some tasks that you're going to do like not perfectly, right? And so my suggestion, at least, is like to allocate your effort across tasks, right? Subject to the constraint not to be fired, so you're going to put 0% to do something. But in some sense, decide what you want to do at your best, right? So, I want to, the incentive, fortunately, unfortunately, in our field and is the fact that you need to focus on your research. Then we can argue about the incentive. But at least it's like, think, okay, I will do 100% research at my best. It doesn't mean that you're going to publish a top 5, but you're going to put a lot of effort on research. And then maybe teaching, I'm going to do something good, but it's okay. If there is some day which I have to decide whether to write a little bit more of the session or to adjust slide number 10 because there is a typos, I'm fine with the typos. Students are going to complain a bit, but I mean, I prefer to do the session 100%. Now, usually my best is that I try to do research at 100%, but this is my best. It's not that it should be your best. What I mean is that you need to decide how to allocate your time or your effort across different tasks. I do teaching around 70% in the sense that I'm not a best teacher. I'm not a natural teacher. I need to put some effort. If I want to be the best teacher in the university, I should spend like a crazy amount of time doing the teacher. So, I mean, I'm okay. Students are happy, but it's not that I will win the award for the best teacher. Administration, I'm terrible. I try to put my effort, but I don't like to reply to the mail. But I'm trying to be there. And then I like to be a good citizen in the sense I like dinner, interact, and so on and so forth. So that one, I think I do almost at 80%. Now, you can decide that you can say, oh, but I will not do this. I will do everything at 100%. If you try to do something like that, then I think you'll find yourself with the fate or someone else will decide for you, right? So in some sense, you need to decide that some of these tasks, you're not going to be the pro of all the tasks. Now, how to do that? Now, I hope that I'm on time, like I almost 2 slides more. So I think there is an important underused word that people do not use much, and the word is no. So when you are like at early career, you have this tendency always to say yes to everything. Do you want to come to the job market? Yes. Do you want to do this extra class? Oh, yes, of course. Oh, do you want to do this? Oh, yes, of course, because you're young and you want to do a lot of stuff. But you need to be very careful with your time, right? Especially if you don't want to give up. So there are some questions to which you should reply no. And mainly I see 2 areas. One is that I don't know if in all the department. In all the department where I have been, there is always some person that in some part is trying to give you like more job that you need to do, right? And to this person, you need to find the person if it's like, and then maybe to this person, one time you say yes, and the second time you say maybe no. A second category is like sometimes students, especially because you're young. Okay, look, there is this young assistant professor. It's very cool. It's like similar to me, and they're going to ask you a lot of questions. You need to be very careful not to say always yes and to be always available. I mean, you should be available, but not 100% of the time available. Now, what I mean with that is that usually what I do when I go to the new department, and here I'm going to stop, is like usually I find a mentor in my department, so a person that I know is from my side, and different departments have different culture. Like for example, in Stockholm, when I was in Stockholm, they don't have much administration, and teaching is very important by few hours. Oxford, tons of administration. We receive, I think, like 50 mails per day. And teaching, we have a lot of teaching, but you cannot be perfect in a lot of teaching. So since these different departments have different culture, what they do is like usually when you go to the new department or new policy, you find a mentor, someone from your side, and then you ask to him or to her, is it fine that I say no to this task or should I say yes? And usually this person can help you, right, to tell you which things you should do and which things you can also say no this time. And you need to be available, and it's important to be available. I mean, you're in a new job, a new place, but I think usually like assistant professors, sometimes they are too much available, like they go to all the I don't know, job market dinner, or they go to the old dinner, they go to all this lot, and then some of their time is taken by these other tasks, especially in the first year, where there is also this pressure that you need to publish, right? So you need to be available, but sometimes you need also to be a good guardian of your time. Okay, thank you. Sorry for being like so maybe over time. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Laura Liu from University of Pittsburgh. So I really learned a lot from Paul and Phyllis' discussion. I really wish I could attend this session like a couple of years earlier. But anyway, you guys have better opportunities than I do. Right? So now it's the third part is about working towards promotion. So it's just a quick word about me. I'm an econometrician. I graduated from University of Pennsylvania in 2017, and I work at the Fed Board for 2 years, and then as assistant professor at Indiana University, Bloomington, for 4 years. And right now, I just got promoted as associate professor at University of Pittsburgh. So the good thing about, like, I'm talking about this topic is that I recently got promoted, so possibly I have some, like, fresh memories about the process. But on the other hand, my path is a little bit untraditional, so I try to combine my experience together with more general advice I heard throughout the past that I think it's useful for everyone, and also be aware that my experience is more on the US side. It could be a little bit different from European universities or UK universities or Asian universities. So just I think for most of us, we know that there will be 3 parts if we want to work towards promotion. That would be research, teaching, and service. So, there, as Fiddy said, right, so there are different cultures in different departments and institutions. So it's possible, like I heard in some institutions, research is the most important. Teaching and service, it should be there, but it's minimum when they counting for the tenure case. But on the other hand, in some departments, all these 3 parts weights equally, right? So again, whenever you are in doubt, you ask your mentor, like in your new department, to see like what's the weight, how much energy you put in each of the topics or like areas, right? So first area, research. Right, so I know like all you guys have exciting research topics that are working on, so I won't talk about like very detailed thing, but I want to pick up a couple of like big picture questions that we discussed with my friends or my like more junior colleagues. Right? So the first big question is what kind of research projects we're working on, right? So whether we're working on some very big, shiny topic or some more like lower hanging fruit, it's not bad. It's just, okay, I know the method, like I'm econometrician, right? So just change my method a little bit, use a new data set, have some more like empirical result, right? That's much hands-on and practical to do. I think, like, of course, there's no right or wrong answer. Right? My personal take is that if we have time, it could be better to have both, right? So for the lower hanging fruit, good thing is that it's easier, it's more approachable. So in a sense, if you have a tenure clock, right, so taking on, you can have something ready, like on your CV. And another good thing, actually, for the lower hanging fruit is that you never know, right? So sometimes you think, okay, this is a big thing, that's, it should be like, everyone pay attention to that, right? But on the other hand, sometimes actually your lower hanging fruit would catch more attention. Actually, in my own case, is that like actually have some more like applied work using the method I developed. And this applied paper got much more citation than like the original, like a big theory, like a hardcore paper. So in that sense, it's not a bad idea, right? So if you build up your research portfolio. But on the other hand, also like you want to have some like bigger thing like you're working on because like a couple of things. A is that in your tenure case, the more practical speaking, that people will look at your research pipeline. So this is your research pipeline, it's your academic ID, right? So identity. And then another thing is that so you want to work on something that you can work on for like a couple of years, for decades, right? So that would be your research, the pipeline you can continue resource to. But in the end, I think, because we're in this academia career, right, so the best thing, the freedom is that we can choose whatever interests us, right? So choose something you're interested into because you have to spend like a couple of months, couple of years on it, so something you're most interested into, as well as you have comparative advantage of. So that's the first big question. The second big question is who to work with, right? So I know many like very good researcher with excellent research is a solo work, right? But on the other hand, I mean, again, no right or wrong answer, but personally, I would prefer like working together with some co-authors. So actually, I really enjoy like interacting or collaborating with others. I think that's the most fun part of research. And also, many of my co-authors are the best friends I have in the profession. So that's another bonus. And also, like how to find co-authors, right? So I think you guys already possibly have many different co-authorships. You can find it from your PhD or postdoc institutions or your current institutions, and also other researchers with common interests when you attend a conference or seminars like here, right, in Barcelona. And as Paul already said, right, so we also want to have some exposure as juniors, so seminars, conference will be good sources for that. And this one doesn't work. Or, beautiful. Could we go back one slide? No, teaching, yeah. So the second part of the evaluation of the tenure would be teaching, right? So I think also Fadi talked a lot about that. I think personally I enjoy teaching, so I find it's a super rewarding experience because when you work on research, right, so you can work on like 1 day, 2 day, 1 week, and without any progress. But for teaching, its other hand is it's always a progress, right? So students will understand new things, and most of them are grateful, right? So it's kind of rewarding, and sometimes I find myself spend too much time because it just feel good, right? So if I don't pay attention to the time management, it could be a little bit like time consuming. So in that sense, I'm still learning. I think I learned a couple of tips from Fidi as well, is that we want to have effective time management and boundaries. I'm still learning, so I don't have much like experience to share, but I put it there, so I think that's important. And something I do want to share is that when we look at our like new job, maybe pay attention to the number of preparations. So the idea is that, for example, if you get an academia job and your teaching load, let's say, is 3 courses a year, right? And it would be a very big difference if these 3 courses a year are the 3 new preparations every year. If that's the case, that's lots of work. But if you keep the same 3 courses for a continuous number of years, that would be more manageable. And on the other hand, also, like, because you keep the same courses, you understand the material better, you understand the students, like distribution, their expectation better, your teaching actually gets better, right? So in that sense, if there's anything possible, of course, it depends on the culture of the department, depends on like the institution, right? So if it's possible, probably, if that's your consideration, one thing is the number of preparations, try to reduce that. Of course, talk to your senior colleague to see what's their advice on it. Okay? Something we have to talk about, maybe sometimes we want to avoid talking about, is the teaching evaluation, right? So if you have some experience with that when you were TA, myself as TA, as instructor, also talking to my friends, we always feel that sometimes the course evaluation is a little bit random, right? So it's not reflect actually the quality of the teaching sometimes. Like my personal take of it is that is that sometimes the course evaluation could be noisy, right? So could be emotional. The students have lots of like different feelings they write into their comments. But on the other hand, all these noisy measures could have some underlying signals in that, although the measurement error is very large. Right? So in that sense, we want to get rid of the measurement error, and we distill the signal. So a couple of more practical things is that we could look into the first objectively, right? So just try to distance us from all these emotions and look at objectively what's written in the comments, and then to see that whether there is any like common trend, right? So like common suggestions. If that's the case, probably we might want to work on that. And the second is that basically if you look at the comments, right? So if some of the comments are kind of more actionable, like reasonable, actionable thing that you can just work on or just adjust a little bit in your next course, of course, you can adopt that. And the third thing is that sometimes the students write about something, they're in all kinds of emotions, right? So it's hard to read like behind the lines, like what they really mean. And my senior colleagues, they told me is that basically for them, especially the chairs, they have been reading like thousands of comments before because they have to prepare for the promotion case. And if that's the case, they really kind of understand most of the comments, what they really mean. So don't be shy to ask your senior colleagues for some feedbacks if you're kind of confused between like what's the students really mean. Okay? And then again, so basically means that the evaluation, sometimes it's not on our favor, but we don't want to just ignore it or just feel bad about it, but we want to learn from it and grow from it. And also, like as a junior faculty member, we also sometimes involved in mentoring and advising graduate students. It's super fun, and Fide already said, right? So, but you have to set boundaries as well. And the third part is about surveys. Let's see how much time. Oh my God, 2 minutes. So very brief, right? So I think again, there's a huge difference across different institutions. So roughly speaking, we will have a department level service and the professional level service, right? So departmental level service will be all kinds of committees. And so basically, we see that most of the departments usually protect their junior faculty from overcommitting. So in that sense, you can focus on research. But still, some services would be required or helpful, and it could be a good experience that we learn how the department works. And on the professional level, some of us probably already done that, is we have to do referees or program committees, and if your institution have funding, maybe organize some workshops or like sessions in conferences. So all this could help us kind of expand our visibility in the profession, and we know that in our tenure case, it's not only evaluated by our internal colleagues, but also external people in our field, right? So in that sense, it could be good to expand our visibility, build our research network, but on the other hand, it could be time consuming, right? So we have to balance the different aspects. And last but not least, we want to be good citizens, right? So actually, the most important thing, right? So we want to be good citizens in both the department level and also at the profession level, right? So actually, being a good citizen, as Fide said, it doesn't mean that you say yes to everything 100% of time. And also, like in my own experience, I feel that you also don't need to be like a super social person. I mean, if you're that kind of person, you can be best friend with everyone in 10 minutes. Like, that's awesome, right? So like when I prepare this discussion with the panelists, and I also share that actually, personally, I'm not that like a super social person, and it seems that I kind of survived, right? So what's behind that is that I think a little bit. So one thing is that we want to be genuine in our interactions with our peers, right? So people can feel that. And second is that we want to be responsible. So we don't need to say yes 100 times. But when we say yes to something, people counting on us, right? So it's better to do a reasonable job. And the third is that it's always good to have a good communication, right? So suppose you're here at the EEA, you have a presentation the day after the next day, but you have a referee report due like yesterday, and you cannot turn it in. And if that's the case, maybe it could be a good idea just to send a concise email to the associate editor saying your constraint and when they can expect your report, right? So just be accountable. I mean, everyone in the profession, almost everyone, are very nice, very accommodating, but we also need to be good citizens, to be like, keep people posted about things, okay? So last slide, can I do that? I think, yeah, general tips. as we all said, right? So A, balance your time. Second, be aware of the difference of the institutions and department. C, always consult with your seniors if you're in doubt. And last but not least, I think it's kind of challenging and also lots of frustrations could be, but it's a rewarding experience. And throughout the experience, I meet many fascinating people, and at the same time working on something super interesting, at least to me. So yeah, so just enjoy, right? Work hard, enjoy.
Thank you very much. So are there any comments, questions for the panelists about anything that they've said that actually is not possible where you are? Please.
Can we have some more thanks a lot. I mean, of course. But I was wondering if you can elaborate a bit more on big shiny projects versus low-hanging fruits, which you like more than what is shiny at the moment, and the importance of rather having or not having a shiny project.
I mean, sorry, I should. Yeah, thank you for the question. So if I understand it correctly, I think I missed the first part of the question. So, I mean, lower hanging fruit, it could be like I've been developing methods, right? So not the method can be directly applicable to an empirical question, but there is a interesting data, interesting question, and I can adapt my method a little bit to do the empirical, have some interesting empirical implications. Right? So, but it might not be I'm in econometrician, so for me something big and shiny might be some like a hard econometrics problem, like method and proof, something like that. But it could be different for different people, right? So if you're applied people, that's then the applied work is like if you have new data, new method, or new model, or new theory, that's big and shining, right? So, yeah, it depends on people. It's just my.
Paul, Fede, you want to come in?
Yeah, I think like from a more applied perspective, I think there's kind of like, for me, the low-hanging fruit oftentimes is a project where I have a question, I know the data that I'm going to use to answer it with, I know the method, I basically can see the paper already in my inner eye when I embark on a project. And it doesn't mean that it has, that this project doesn't answer a big and shiny question, but there is kind of like sometimes a correlation with that, right? So I have also projects where I embarked on this journey and I had no clue in the beginning where it led me. I just know this is an interesting question and I will have to figure out on the way of how this is being done because like the reference points in the existing literature are just not there. And I think that could be kind of like cues to kind of like identify what is a low-hanging fruit as opposed to something that is perhaps more big and shiny or more risky, at least in terms of the project.
I mean, I'm more like from a macro perspective, but I agree with them. So from a macro perspective, I think like, I mean, big shiny is like you have like a new question, develop a new code with something very difficult to do, or like develop a new model. And instead, maybe you have this model that is open economy with flexible exchange rate. Now you think like the low-hanging fruit is like, maybe I do like this also in a monetary union in the next paper just to see what happened. And it doesn't mean that the second paper is not a good publication or whatever, but it's like easy to do, right? It's like,
yeah, I think basically what we are saying here is risky against safe. So I have something that plan, because we know all the publication delays and lags. It's much better than when I started a few years back when it could take more than a year for the first response. So we are nowhere where we were then, but I think that the suggestion here is to have something safe that you can, it's not possibly, you hope so, but possibly it's not going to do super well, but it's going to give you something. Yeah.
And if I can pick up on that, oftentimes the risk in embarking in this big and shiny project with fixed time pressure, let's say, is that you put all the eggs in one basket and you may end up with nothing. So I was wondering if you have some suggestions on how to ask feedback ask for feedback on how to hedge your bets a little bit. And this comes also in the context of maybe trying to raise funds for your idea. So trying to have feedback on how to come up with a plan B in case your plan A doesn't work, or even ex ante, how to come up with ideas that could lead you to a plan A and plan B. How do you ask for feedback on that? Because I feel like sometimes when you ask for feedback, people tell you you should focus on the big and shiny thing without necessarily considering the risks that come from being in a more junior position and having this time pressure.
So as kind of more senior here, let me take that one, because I think what I would strongly advise you to do is to talk to someone, which is something that they've all actually independently said, to go to somebody senior in your department, if you can, somebody who, for instance, depending on the specific problem, that has expertise in that area. If they also have some kind of editorial experience, it also helps. And also somebody who knows the local culture, what is valued, because after all, you know, once you are committed to a place, what is important is that you can then progress in that place. And as all of them were saying in different words, local culture could be different, right? So there may be places where teaching is absolutely important, where you are expected to put 100 in absolutely all the categories, but again, it depends what the teaching load is in that place, right? So there are always, and I think having that local knowledge, knowing what happened in the past with similar cases is invaluable, if you can.
Just following up on that, I think like in this particular case, it should be someone, I mean, it's always great to talk to very senior people, and but I also see kind of like that there could be a tendency that they tend to forget over time kind of like the competing pressures that you face, kind of like especially when you're transitioning into the job and working towards promotion. So I would probably turn to someone who's experienced but not too experienced in terms of having forgotten what it means, basically maybe ending up with nothing there. So I don't know, a more kind of like maybe a recently promoted associate professor or someone who is at the end of the assistant professorship and so forth, because they still have like kind of like a stronger vision for what that maybe means.
Please go ahead.
No, you can go ahead, because it's like I have like, so I think that you should do like both like these low-hanging fruit, but I'm a very risky person, so I go 100% risky, and I got all the feedback in my first 3 years that it was like you need to have low-hanging fruit, and I didn't have anything, and I kept doing, but it was very risky strategy. So like, in some sense, now because everything went well, I'm here, but I mean, if everything wouldn't went well, I wouldn't be here, but it doesn't, I mean, I think there was a lot of luck also involved in that process, right? So I think also another thing is that I want to say, if a paper will not enter, or if you will not get your top 5 publication, it's not that you're not good. There is a lot of luck involved in the publication process, right? You got the right referee, or for example, I got 3 referees that were almost against, and then we got the editor that liked the paper. So you never know, right, what is going on. So don't be stressed if you don't get your publication soon, right?
Thank you for all the advice, but with everything that has been said, I can't shake the feeling that this world is stressful and demanding, and perhaps too demanding. And I was wondering to what extent you share that vision, because I feel that all the advice has been given to just follow the system. To what extent is it perhaps worthwhile to sit in committees and boards where we could perhaps change what we expect from young academics?
I agree with you. So, I mean, we have been asked to say what you should do in this world, right? So, given the rules, we are being asked, our task here is to say how you should do the role. It's true that I think like some pressure should be like, at least this is my opinion, it's my personal opinion, especially because, for example, like at least the 6 years, 8 years of your young career, if you're a woman, right, they coincide also in a period in which there is, also even if you're a man, which maybe your partner has high fertility and you have kids, and maybe you don't want to have kids, but there are other pressure. And I think this thing that you need to publish everything in the first 6 years is very difficult, and then you have to teach. So you're right that some things should be changed, but this is not what we have been asked to do in this.
Just to quickly add that, I agree with you. This is like stressful, but that's kind of a couple of things. A is that it's slowly changing, right? So institutions are more trying to protect like juniors more, as well as I think that's the leadership. That's possibly we could talk to more like people in the profession, and also like people climbing up the ladders. They could do more, like making everything like easier. Right? So on the other hand, that's like I said, right? So it could be rewarding. So if like you work on something you're interested in, right? So the work won't be that stressful. Like that's possible, like one part, good thing. If you enjoy interacting with students, that's good, right? So.
I completely agree. Like, I mean, if you want to succeed in this profession, you, to some extent, you're forced to play by the rules of the games, and the game is, I think, very stressful. What helps me a lot was kind of like, or what helped me a lot is kind of like this realization that it's my own choice. So in the sense that, I mean, if it's becoming too stressful for me, the outside option is I'm going to get a better paid job in the private sector and work less hours. And I think, I mean, this realization has helped me a lot, just like to realize, okay, this is my choice. As long as I love this job that much and I'm willing to pay the costs for it, that's up to me, right? But there's always basically the kind of like the outside option is not unemployment and being on the street. There's always something lurking behind the corner that is still giving you a life that might even be better in many dimensions. But yeah, it's up to you to decide what you want in that moment, I think.
Yes, thank you. And one thing I would like to add, I think very often we are our worst enemies because a lot of the pressure is coming from ourselves, but it's also coming from the environment. I completely agree with you. So there are some things that I think it's only the people coming into the profession now who can change them. So I'll give you just a little example since we are talking about fertility choices. In many countries, not all, but there's something called shared parental leave, whereby the maternity leave isn't taken all by the new mom, but is shared with the father or with the partner, with the other partner. So this is something, guys, that if you start using more, it kind of normalizes these behaviors, because there is a lot of stigma still, even in the academic, super open-minded community about, for instance, stay-at-home parents where they are the non-traditional role, so typically men. So these are things that, it's very difficult to change a culture, but that happens when, as it often happens in many places, you have 2, 3 new assistant professors coming in 1 year, and then the next year, and then the next year. So you have this cohort of young people who can change that culture, and that is what relieves the pressure. And also talking about these things, talking about mental health, recognizing and not seeing it as a weakness, because we always feel that we have to have that shield on, and the point is, if we always wait for somebody else to start, it's not going to happen. So somebody must, break the ice, lead the way, and recognize that, yeah, this happens, and you'll discover that a lot of people are struggling against the same demons that you are struggling with. I mean, if this is sad, and it just makes it easier to share the load, to recognize that these things are just part of life. Never forgetting that we are, as you were saying, in a very privileged profession, because we choose every morning with all, the chores, yes, the admin, the emails, but we choose what we want to research on every day. And that is, and we are paid for it. And we share our knowledge with the student. We shape the new generation. So that's very privileged. And, if we focus on the positives, I think, letting go a little bit of the pressure and making sure that you build time for relaxing and just not doing, you just let the pen drop and forget about something is part which, something that which will make you more productive the following day. So breaks are important. But thanks, I think it's a very important question, so thanks for raising that. And on that note, I think our time is up. So I would like to thank you all for coming and thank our panelists for being so nice.